third. Awesome. And let's let them in. And then here they all come. Oh, oh my gosh, look at that. How old is that baby, Ashley?
Like 2.5 weeks, right?
Yeah, 2.5 weeks.
Oh my goodness, you're stealing the show with that precious little one.
What can I say?
Oh my goodness. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. It's so good to see you. I am so incredibly excited about today. I want to give people another minute or two to pop in here because I know that this is not only a popular topic, but Jen is so loved and adored in our industry.
Thank you, Megan.
I mean it. You're like the sweetest person. Everyone that meets you just adores you.
Oh, I love that.
What's that, dear?
Said I'm excited to share.
Well, you have quite a story, so I know that they will be inspired by everything that you have done. And you were one of the first ones that I asked when we decided to do this. Literally, I think like that day, I was like, we're going to do this. I'm going to ask Jen.
I think I picked a far out date just because I'm like, we'll do it in a few months.
You had no clue it was going to be so popular. It's been funny. People are like starting to make requests. Hey, can we have somebody talk about this and talk about that? And
I'm on every one, even if I'm not physically on, because it's early in the morning for me. A lot of times I am on with my camera off as I'm getting ready and getting Abby ready. Like, I don't want to miss that.
Good. Yes, we found that they're really fun. Great way to bring community together. It's so nice to like see faces, hear voices, and then really just share, right? That's the goal, is to help us all grow, to help us all achieve more, do more. And so I'm going to give them one more minute. They're still coming. I knew you'd be popular. And then we will get started. All right. Oh, there's Miss Washburn. That was a great one. She is so smart. I don't know if I can do it. I just don't know if I could do what she does. All right. All right, well, let's get rolling. Well, thank you all so very much for joining us for this webinar today. We have the incredible Jen Hassett, who is going to share a little bit about her journey as an agency owner. And she has an amazing story to share. In addition, some tips and tricks about opening a second, third, or in Jen's case, fourth location. If you have not attended one of our webinars before, we ask that you put your questions in the chat box. I will then call upon you, and you are welcome to unmute and ask your question, or you can have me read it for you, whichever you prefer. We'd love to see your faces if at all possible, but understand that many of you may be working as we're speaking. So thank you for those of you that are able to join us live, and we hope that those of you watching the replay will be able to join us live in the future. So let's start with Jen and just ask a couple of questions to get to know her for those of you that haven't had the pleasure of meeting this wonderful, kind soul. Jen, tell us, how long have you had a perfect fit? Oh, hold on, Jen, you're muted. My fault. I muted everybody, including you.
I am muted myself. I got it.
Thank you. All right, go ahead. How long have you had a perfect fit?
So I'm not actually the original owner. The owner and founder is a good friend of mine, Janet Pemper, and she founded A Perfect Fit in 2009. And at the time we were nannies, she saw a need in the area, and with inspiration from her nanny family, they even came up with the name A Perfect Fit, her nanny family at the time. She started the business, and when about a year into her business, around 2010, end of 2010, she got pregnant and knew she was going to need help. So I jumped in as a placement coordinator. I still worked full time with my family. My family was super supportive because they knew their kids were getting older and was like, oh, this might be a great opportunity for me to transition, you know, maybe not need her as many hours. And so they were super supportive. I worked as a placement coordinator. And then as Janet grew her family. She went from having twins to having another big old family. She decided that the agency just wasn't a priority anymore. And so she was planning on dissolving the agency. And in 2015, she came to me and said, would you mind keeping up? At the time we offered 1 year replacement policies for everyone. So
A year.
1 year. Yeah. And
Wow.
so she had families that had replacement policies. And she says, would you mind keeping up with this? I'll just pay you per placement as they come. I just don't want to leave these families high and dry if something doesn't work out. And that kind of sparked my interest of like, I don't know, maybe we don't want to let this go. So I offered to buy it from her. She accepted. So 2016, I became the owner. And at the time I was still nannying. I went down to part-time and did after school nannying. And it only took me about 6 months to be able to leave my nanny position and do this full time.
Wow, that's fast. Okay, so before the agency owner, you were the placement coordinator. Before that, you were a nanny. What about before that?
So I actually was a teacher for a short time. I went nanny, teacher, nanny, and I also worked at daycare. So I started working in daycare when I was 16. And then one of my families at the daycare snagged me and said, I need you as our nanny. I will pay you more than this daycare. And that's how I found out about nannying, and then left thinking, I needed something more professional. Didn't, as all nannies do, right? You get the question of, well, what are you going to do after you're done babysitting? And so that got to me when I was in my 20s, it bothered me. So I got my master's in education, taught for 1 year, and said, I'm a nanny. This is what's in me. I love nannying. So I went back to nannying. My old family took me back, open arms. And then this kind of fell into my lap. And I always wanted to just be a stay-at-home mom. That was my goal. I was like, as soon as I find my husband and have a baby, I'm going to stay at home and be a nanny for my own kids. Never did I think I would be a business woman and have a nanny of my own.
It's funny how the journeys that we go on lead us to where we were meant to be.
Yeah.
There's a quote about that. What if along the way, doing what you thought you should do, you find out what you're actually supposed to do? Something like that.
So
okay.
True.
So 6 months after buying it, you're doing it full time. Like, this is incredible. You're rocking and rolling. How long were you a one-woman show? Did you hire team members along the way pretty quickly? What does that journey look like?
Yeah, so I knew in about 2 years in that I needed a little help, and one of my good friends was a nanny, and her kids were in school, and she had a lot of downtime, and said like, hey, I'll help you reference calls, do an interview here or there, phone calls. And so I had my friend Felicia start helping me out about 2 years in, and that I even brought her with me to my first conference, the INA conference in New Orleans. That was my first ever conference, and brought her along. And at that time, we were just had opened my first branch as well, Denver, at that time. So kind of a lot going on.
Yeah, for sure.
I
So
was
it's
still,
you and her, and then you went to Denver.
yeah. And so Denver, jump into that. Sorry, Denver, that branch kind of fell into my lap because at the time when I worked at a daycare in Denver, my boss, who was the director of the daycare, her and I became good friends and stayed in touch. And when she saw what I was doing in Phoenix, she reached out and said, you need to do this in Denver. Like, you need to do this in Denver. She had so many of her employees, being the director of the daycare, kind of jump from nanny and back and forth and use agencies. And there's an amazing agency in Denver, I'm sure most of you know, and there wasn't really much else besides them. And at that time I was so new, I didn't even know any agencies anywhere because I hadn't been to a conference. And so, Nicole was her name. She actually helped me open a branch. She flew out to Phoenix, spent a week with me, learned the ropes. And then the way I started that branch was essentially giving her royalties. And she did it. She mimicked essentially what I was doing in Phoenix, but did it all herself. So I was essentially making money and not doing any work except coaching her through problem situations and things like that. So I had not even considered opening another branch until that situation.
So interesting. So one thing, this common thread in all of your stories that we've heard so far, and there's more for those of you that don't know Jen's incredible story, but it appears to me like, excuse me, you make relationships, you keep up with those relationships, and you see opportunity that's presented in front of you, right? And so buying the agency was your relationship, right? Owning the agency became your relationship. Having the first hire was because of relationship. The second location was a relationship, right? It's all relationships. Okay. I love that. You know how I feel about relationships. Okay. So then you have the second location in Denver. Your words were, I wasn't doing anything and I was making money. Like, surely that's not how it went the entire time.
No, definitely not. So I thought that this was going to be the great way to set it up, right? Is I have someone that's going to take a percentage of everything that comes in. I already have my processes in place. I already have the accounts on MailChimp, and we pay for this and we pay for that. It's not going to cost me more to do it again in another location. So I quickly found that this was not my ideal setup, and not to say that's not your ideal setup. It was the way that got me into having multiple locations, and I will forever be grateful for that experience. But found that I preferred the setup of having everything in-house and having everyone work together as a team, not having a separate Denver and a separate how I envisioned it in the beginning. And I had to learn a lot through that experience of the challenges that arose from having two kind of separate entities in a way.
Interesting. Okay. So then you had Phoenix, Denver, then what was next?
Dallas. So Denver was still running independently by Nicole, with little interaction at this point. You know, she had pretty much learned the ropes, and I was sending invoices for families and handling the finances. And then I would pay her royalties, as it was called, for all the placements that she made. And so when I decided I wanted to do it differently, I was very, very much, and I mean, Nicole could watch this. I was attached to Nicole emotionally and loved everything we were doing, but knew that there was more opportunity if I took charge myself. And so what I did was, and interest me to try it again, but without hindering what I had in Denver that was building in my relationship with Nicole. But I didn't really have the guts to pull the trigger and just pick a location and do it. Well, interesting as it was, at the time I had a client that I was working with. Her sister was diagnosed with terminal cancer in Phoenix. We were working on helping them find multiple nannies and just supporting them through a really, really hard time. And the sister was in Dallas. And so I just built a really good relationship, sending multiple nannies in the home. Their needs were just very extensive and changed often. And so I was very hands-on and working with this sister. And so in building this relationship with her, throughout that, she also expressed to me the need. She had nannies herself. Lots of friends have nannies, and said, have you considered opening in Dallas?
Why not?
Yeah, well, I am considering a new location, hadn't even thought about where, but I wanted to test out some ideas and theories that I had, and what I would do differently, what I learned from Denver to do it different. So I did some market research, help of Megan. At this time, I was already consulting with Megan, and she helped me do some market research and set me up for success there. And yeah, so when I started with Denver, I still was when I started with Dallas, I was still keeping Denver separate, and decided to use my staff that I had and combine essentially my Phoenix and Dallas processes. So my placement coordinators would switch off. One would take a Dallas job, one would take a Phoenix job. They would both interview nannies, and just kind of switch off at the time. I did hire boots on the ground. This was pre-COVID. I had boots on the ground. I hired an employee that was in Dallas that knew and understood the city, the culture, the areas, the weather, all of the things that is very hard to run, which I'll get to when I talk about further location, which can be challenging if you don't know and understand the location. And at the time, she did all of our in-person interviews. We met all of our nannies in person until COVID. So that was really nice to have her.
Wow. Okay. All right. Phoenix, Denver, Dallas, again, all relationships, which we didn't talk about this prior, but I just think it's beautiful. She's going to keep going. I have some more questions, but I want to make sure that you get your questions answered. So put them in the chat box, gang, or I'll just keep talking because I'm always prepared. So after Dallas, there was another one. How did you come up with that one?
Yeah. So in between my most recent location is Miami. We cover all of South Florida, including Fort Lauderdale. But prior to opening that, we decided to combine Denver with our processes. We were successful in Dallas. I felt like after trial and error with some changing some things and adjusting some things, it was working well. And I wanted to include Denver in that. Nicole was very supportive. Her daughter actually had a baby. She was moving from Denver to Houston anyway, and said, you know what, we're moving, we're changing. Why don't you just take it over? She kind of stepped out. We agreed that it was best for the company. She has now since come back and joins us for our nanny coordinator. So she's back kind of in the perfect fit family. As a nanny coordinator, but so I combined Denver and focused on getting all three of the cities working simultaneously and keeping our processes, as similar as we can, also keeping in mind the needs of the families in different locations are different, and the needs of the nannies are different, and the processes can need to be tweaked. So we do have different processes for each city in regard to that, but in general, our screening process, our family consultation and onboarding process and all of that is streamlined. So once I nailed that, felt like all three cities were thriving, we're doing well. I said, and this is honestly all just 100% honest, this is not relationship based. This was my husband's inspiration saying, like, we need another location. We need another location. We need another location. Because mind you, I bought Perfect Fit in 2016. I opened Denver 2017, and I opened Dallas 2018. So I was boom, boom, boom. And things were, I was making changes, but things were flowing. And so I did not open South Florida until 2021. It took me some time because it wasn't the same type of feeling of falling into my lap, meeting somebody, knowing somebody where I felt confident. It was more doing a lot of research and finding the right location and picking anywhere. Like, where's the need? What city what city do I see a need in? And it has been my most challenging city, I will say. The boots on the ground we do not have, and I think that would be super helpful. Potentially my next hire, that will be someone I will look for in that area. And the cultural differences, the family's needs are very different. The nannies are very different. So, we're a couple of years in, and I'm still working out the tweaks and haven't gotten my flow there quite yet. We're not giving up, but I will say it's not all roses and flowers over there quite yet.
So to reiterate, you use the same process, but it's tweaked for each location. And you found that there are differences between the families and the nannies, obviously. And you would say Miami was your trickiest location to start. Is that right? Okay. And do you have plans to potentially open another location?
I do not. I think I'm good. I'm solid with my 4. I'd like to expand some services. We just launched our newborn care solutions, or newborn care specialist department just a couple months ago, and focusing on growing in that realm has been really exciting for us. But yeah, I think I'm good for a while with 4 locations. I live in Hawaii. If you don't know, I live in Hawaii, and everyone asks me, when are you to open in Hawaii? So maybe potentially I'll do a little bit of business out here, but I think it would look very, very different than what we do at a Perfect Fit. Honestly, maybe even a whole different company together, because Hawaii's needs and culture, everything is so different than what it is on the mainland. I don't think I can even use the same processes as I would on the mainland.
Interesting. All right, let's ask some questions because they're coming in like fire. Someone from a Samsung has a question. I don't know who that is, if they want to speak or not. I'm guessing they're on their phone.
Sorry, that's me, Megan.
Hi,
Carissa.
hello, beautiful. It's so
Hi.
good to see your face. Please, my dear, ask your question.
Jen, you made that sound so easy, and I missed like 5 minutes, so maybe there was some struggle that I missed in that first 5 minutes. But I would love to know like your like necessary steps, like, because I've been trying to launch in other locations, and maybe we're not focusing on it enough. But do you feel like you just pretend like you're starting over from scratch and then you have certain steps in place? I'd love to know, like, what are the most important steps when you're starting in a new location?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And honestly, my quick, snippet story of my history, I focus on the positive, and that's me. I'm a glass half full positive person, and I'm very happy see where I've gotten, but definitely not without bumps along the roads and a lot of lessons, to get to where I've been. But okay, so I would say quick, brief overview. Number one is your market research, making sure you're choosing the right location, because once you're committed and once you start investing in, attorneys, contracts, all of that, you're set up, then you kind of dive in. So the market research is super, super important. Making sure to understand the culture there, what the family's needs are, what the nanny's needs are, and what that market looks like. Sometimes you can have a misconception because there's like maybe no or little successful seeming agencies out there. So you think, well, why isn't there an agency? Let's go. There might be a reason for that. Or you see, gosh, there's some really amazing agencies. Like I can throw my hat in there, but like how much business is there to go around? How big is the city? What's the income and areas and things like that. So focusing on that, it would be number one. And then once you pick your city and you find your place, making sure you understand all the legality of it. So speaking with a local attorney to understand all of the ins and outs, like just throw out an example, Denver, for example, they have some interesting laws where, we're not allowed to critique our nannies on their social media. You can't, their background check laws are more strict on when you can run background checks and what information you can provide, like little things like that. Every location has these different tweaks and things that you need to know. Or if you're, I'm a referral agency, to preface, by the way, if you're employment, then there's even more. Or because as a referral agency, we want to educate our families, right, on what they have to do as employers. And every state is so different on what is required for employment. We actually rely, see Rachel's on the call, we rely on her little tip sheets a lot at Homework Solutions. At the end of her sheet, you could just type in the state, and it kind of gives you a brief overview of like what that state requires for sick pay and if they require contracting laws and everything like that. But even, you want to make sure that you have a local attorney that's going to keep up with your contracts. We rewrite our contracts for every location and get that approved by an attorney. And then I would say as I said earlier, kind of the boots on the ground. I personally think, and this is a personal choice, I've done it both ways. And during COVID, we had times where we didn't have an employee in each location. I rely on my in-person employees a lot. Just random storms that you don't know happened and nannies are canceling interviews, and you're like, oh, well, there's a huge winter storm. Like we should be canceling these interviews to make sure our nannies are safe. And you're not checking the news in every location if you're not there. Little things like that really has been helpful. And that's what I look forward to for trying to gain more traction in our South Florida markets is getting someone that's really familiar with the market in that area.
Those were so good. Thank you. Those were amazing. Okay, so Emily has a message, but she is in Italy, so she's asked me to read it for her. Oh, Italy.
I'm jealous.
I know. She says, what are the considerations that prevent you and your agency from going nationwide?
Very, very good question. I am not a risk taker. I'm very risk adverse. And I personally feel that even just the 4 locations that I have, every location is different in their employment laws, their laws for doing business there, licensing. And I don't want to take on a client in a state that I'm not confident that we are checking every single box. And to me, it is too intricate. There, California, they have background check companies that you have to go through, and you have like, I believe it's, don't quote me on this, I think New Jersey still requires you to have an actual physical office. Some states they say that, but you can have different type of like virtual office. As long as you have an address to be sent legal mail to is really what they're looking for. But there's still some states. I think Illinois has some interesting ones that I just don't want to touch all that. It's just too much for me. I'm happy to focus on our locations that we have. And I really like to build the relationships with our clients and know that we have a pulse on their market, that we're not just, a one size fits all agency.
Love that. Love that. And it's New York that requires the physical location. Yep.
I'm from New Jersey, so I mix the two up all the time.
Maria, did you want to ask your question, my dear?
Sure. Thank you. So I was wondering, and you kind of answered this with other questions, but how did you go about attacking the research that you needed to do? Did you do an outsourced did you use an outsourced consulting company? I mean, how did you, a researcher, you know, how did you do it all yourself? Did you go to the Chamber of Commerce? I mean, how did you kind of go about beginning with your research to see if this was the right location for you?
A very good question. So I actually learned this from Megan. So I'm an OG consultant. When I started consulting with her back in 2018, I think 17. And so I went through her whole program, and she does a whole section that goes over finding your target market, doing your market research. And so I followed when I did that for, even though I was open in Phoenix already at the time, she still has you go through your current market to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row. And so I essentially just recreated that. So I won't tell you step by step on what Megan does. I'll have you ask her and get with her program. I'm sure she'd be happy to help you help with all that fun market research. But I find what she does, I really did find that to be like spot on. I didn't have to do anything. I didn't choose to do anything extra and above and beyond what's not already in her program.
Okay. And one quick question, do you go to your locations? Do you have to visit them several times a year? How does that work? Do you physically need to be there ever?
That's a really good question. So I'm from Phoenix. I'm originally from New Jersey, but I grew up in Phoenix, and that's why I opened that branch. So I'm there often just visiting all of my friends. I lived in Denver for 3 years. That's why I worked at the daycare there. So I have a reason to potentially go back. I don't have to. I still have so many roots there just from living there that it's easy for me to, keep a market there. When I opened Dallas, I did go there. I spent a week interviewing. So I went to do in-person interviews wanting to hire a person there. And then Miami's the first one where I did not do that. So I've been to Miami on vacation, but I did not go there to do any sort of in-person market research. And I still haven't hired staff there. And the only reason I haven't is just the time zone change, because we do run all 4 locations on Mountain Standard Time. So all my staff can work the same time. I find it very helpful for everybody to be working at the same time. And so not that everybody on the East Coast doesn't want to work Mountain Standard Time, but I find it to be harder to work, especially with the time being 3 hours later, that would be working till 8 p.m. So that's really the only reason I haven't hired there yet.
We'll talk about her team because it's extraordinary. We might have to bring her back, but yeah, her team and the way she does it. Oh, my heart. And Maria will find out she is now officially part of our community, Jen. So we're trying to get her at a retreat.
Okay.
All right, Tony, did you want to ask your question, my dear, about Floridia?
So it sounds like do you have a physical office with at least one person working in all but Florida?
So we don't have a physical office. Everybody works remote from home. And I do have staff all over the US because my staff over the years have moved to different states. So if they move, they stay with me. So we do have I have right now 8 staff in 5 different locations, I believe. And so I do have someone in Denver, Dallas, and Phoenix right now that live there. And I don't have anybody in South Florida. So that's the only location that I don't have someone working, but we don't have actual offices. But you do have to have in Florida, you do have to have a physical, every location you have to have a physical address that essentially legally they need to be able to subpoena you. They can't do that to a post office. They can't do it to certain virtual offices. So it's best if you have an employee that's willing to be your agent in that state. But then you have to consider, for example, our Dallas employee during COVID, we had to let her go. We didn't need in person anymore. And we were, COVID, we didn't need as much staff. And so we didn't have that in person or physical address with her, and I had to switch agents. So that is something to consider too. If you're using your employee as an agent, keep in mind it is a process to switch that agent.
Gotcha.
Very good. All right, Miss Amy, wherever you are in the world today, you're another one that'll be sharing soon. Amy, do you want to ask yours, honey?
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, Jen, on pros and cons that have gone through your head of why you've gone to different cities versus diving deeper in each city with different services.
Yeah, so I'll kind of start backwards to answer opening new locations versus adding more services. So I go back and forth with this. I talked to Sarah. I see Sarah's on here from Washburn. I oftentimes get very intrigued by branching out and offering a lot more services. We will do housekeepers and personal assistants and non-childcare related roles. I just struggle with the thought of potentially losing what my target market is looking for, and that is premier childcare. And so I really like to focus in on, that's why I was comfortable doing NCS, because you have a baby, you might want an NCS. It's right along the realm of that, like premier childcare needs. And so that's why I go the route of another location, because I feel if I can help families in another location, I can offer still that same premier childcare level experience that my target market is looking for. Now, as far as pros and cons, I mean, the biggest pro I would say is, you know, when you have the peaks and valleys of your numbers, you know, you have great months and you have slow months. It's really nice to see that one location can potentially help get you over that hump, you know, over another. Another pro is, you know, bringing in just more, you know, revenue, a different revenue stream, obviously. It's a lot of fun. It's a challenge. So I look at that as a pro. It keeps me on my toes, because when something's going on in one location, it's not in another, and you know, it keeps things fun and exciting. Some cons is, you know, the stress that comes along with it. I am a perfectionist, and I want to make sure that I am an expert in everything I do. And I do not like to not have the answer to questions for clients. So if I'm not in the location, or I'm not, like Dallas, for example, I've never lived, I've been there a few times. I want to make sure to know all the answers. And sometimes I don't like to feel kind of out of control in that regard. So having an employee will really helps in that way. Also, with bringing in more revenue brings in more spending, you know, so you have to spend more to make more, and then turning that revenue into profit. That's something I've noticed. My profit margins have gone down a bit. My revenue goes up, but my profit margins go down because I'm spending more to keep up with all the locations. So at the end, you know, you want more profit, right? That's really what we want. You could have all the revenue in the world, but it doesn't matter if you can't turn that into profit. So that, I think, would be, and I wouldn't say it's a con, because it'll get there, right? It just takes more time, more patience, and tweaking things constantly. And then I would say also the staff. I find managing staff to be the most stressful part of my job, and to have multiple locations requires more staff, which is more work on me. I did have an office manager that managed my staff through my end of my pregnancy, maternity leave, and early childhood years when Abby was younger. But now that she's older, I've taken that back on, and it's the least favorite part of my job. I just really don't like managing staff. I love my staff. I just don't want to manage them. So I think that would probably be my biggest con.
Audrey, did you want to ask your question, dear?
Sure. Hi. I think you kind of answered this already with Maria's. Oh, I think I have this off the whole time. You answered this already, I think, a little with Maria's question, but I'll go ahead and just ask it since I typed it out already. But what would you say is the most successful strategy you've used when opening a new location to attract clients when you started?
Oh, to attract clients. Okay. So I think for a brand new location, I personally used my same website so that I could keep SEO. There's a lot of different strategies for that. If you go to my website, perfectfitnanny.com, top right, we have the locations, but if you've never been before, you should get a pop-up that will say, where are you located? And it will, then you can select your location so you don't have to toggle through that. So what that does is it allows me to keep my SEO up in general for my site. But when you Google, say you live in Dallas and you're Googling, I need a nanny in Dallas Nanny Agency, you're going to be lower ranked in SEO because people aren't Googling you in Phoenix, where my SEO is built. So I think SEO is really important because people Google what they're looking for. And then every client that you get, building that relationship with, so that you get referrals. That has been so beneficial. And now my staff does most of that, training them to build that relationship and have superior customer service from start to finish. Even if they don't hire, we all have these families that don't hire from you because they found someone on their own, but that doesn't mean they didn't have an amazing experience with your agency. And that is so important to still hold on to that, still check in with them, still offer support, even with the nanny they hired, so that they can then tell their friends when their friends are looking for nannies. We did use Google Ads, and we found Google Ads to be successful as well. When you're not ranking naturally, using Google Ads is nice to have to be able to get your name up there when people are searching.
Got it. Got it. Perfect. Thank you.
You said that word again. This should be like co-called why relationships are important. She just
You didn't plan this, by the way.
I know. But if anybody, when people meet you, they see that too, because you're so genuine, right? You're just so kind and sweet. All right, Miss Jamie Dennis. Hello, dear. Would you like to
Hello.
ask your question?
Yes, thank
I
you.
didn't see you're on the call.
Hi. So I'm eating lunch, Mountain Standard Time. But I just want to say, Jen, thanks for sharing. It's been really fun to listen to your journey. I'd love to know a little bit about your top criteria for assessing and ultimately choosing your second or third or fourth location. What is it you're really looking for that makes you feel like, it's prime for opening up there?
Really good question. So I'll say for Denver, obviously that happened because I lived there and I had roots there and had someone that was willing to do it. I didn't even have interest there. And then for Dallas, also that client connection sparked the interest in that location, and then the research sold itself there. I mean, it's just that was and I'll tell you about the research. And then for Miami, it was purely research. So essentially looking into what agencies are currently there, what are they doing, evaluating that, and then as well as what the family's needs are, what type of work. Like, for example, Dallas is very, there's a lot of what they call old money in Dallas. It's very Southern. A lot of people that were born into this, they have a totally different mindset when I'm talking to a Dallas family versus a Denver family. Whereas Denver, you're going to have younger professionals, quick talking. They're not going to question a lot of things that you say. They looked at your site and trust you as a professional. Versus Dallas, you're going to have some extreme questions about where, why, who, why, where you come from. I think just learning and understanding that, what the families need and what they're wanting to hear to trust you, and building that trust, I think has been key for me, and what I'm still trying to figure out in South Florida. I haven't quite figured those guys out yet. Florida is a unique one.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen.
Yeah.
All right, Miss Colleen, did you want to ask your question, dear? I'm going to go with no. She asked, how soon after you opened your agency did you sign your first client? And did you have a physical location when you first started out? They are obsessed with the physical location. You might as well just go ahead and tell them how many of your employees you've met in person.
Yeah, so I just met 2 of my employees in person at the last APNA conference. I hadn't met them. Both of them had worked for me, one for 2 years, one for 1 year. I'm meeting another one here at INA coming up. So that will be my last one. I've met everybody. And then I have some VAs in the Philippines that I'm planning on going out to meet, hopefully next year. But we do, out of all of our 8 employees, before this last conference, half of them I hadn't even met. So in person. The physical location is something that it pre-COVID, I thought I wanted. I really did. I said, I'm going to have a location. We're going to have a branch where we're going to work together. I'll have everybody in Phoenix. And then when COVID happened, that went out the window, but I've never had a physical location. So, but I mean, it works for a lot of people. So I don't think that I don't want to shy people away from it if it's something that they want to do. And then, wait, what was the first part of the question? Sorry, I got hung up on that too.
It's okay. How soon after you opened your agency did you sign your first client?
Yeah. I wish I could remember that, but I feel like I would be making it up if I answered that. I'm so sorry, but I don't have a memory. I know I could tell you with Miami because that was more recent. It took a couple months or a few months. It was a long time, but technically we had a client that one of our Phoenix families that was moving. And so we didn't find that organically. So I didn't really count that. And that happened when we weren't even quite launched, but we were close enough to say like, oh yeah, we'll help you out. We know the laws in Florida and we're confident we'll be able to help you.
Great. Yes, I wanted to point that out because I think some people think they have to have a physical location. But one thing that I love about Jen is she's never let the barriers of your proximity, geography, keep her from growing. And so she does have an incredible team. How long has Kara been with you over in the Philippines?
Almost 4 years.
Right. So she's an incredible team that is international and is doing great work for her. Lisa, we're going to get to your question. You're not going to like the answer. That's why I'm skipping over. Carissa has something about organizing locations. I think we would all love to know that.
Yeah. I believe you're using like your husband created your CRM to organize your locations. Is that right?
Yeah, so
Okay.
unfortunately that he's not selling. I know he talked about
Yeah.
that for a bit and we did some research there, but we decided to keep that in-house. So yeah,
Okay.
and he does all my
So-
website.
Okay. So I'm thinking like how technically like just organizing everything. So do you have separate emails, addresses for each location? And then do you break it down by nannies and type of service and like candidates and like your phone lines? I just would love to know like more about how you organize all those locations.
That's a really good question. So we use, when you go to our website, if you fill out a contact form, it will automatically know the location based on where you are. And same thing with families and nannies. So if you're the first time on our website, it will have you select your location and then it will remember where you are. And it automatically will go, if you're a nanny and you're filling out an application, it will know which site you're on, and then it will cross-reference what address that they put in. And same thing with families and same thing with our contact forms. And then that all goes through our CRM, which my husband built, and he sources that. So I can look at just Dallas, I can look at just Denver, I can look at just South Florida, or I can look at everybody. So that's broken up in that regard. And then as far as phone lines, we use Grasshopper. I know some people I've seen on, I think the Facebook group, having some issues with Grasshopper. I've used it from day one and I've never had an issue with connectivity or anything like that. Everybody on my team has their own Grasshopper phone number, including my VAs in the Philippines have their own. And then we have a phone line for each location in that city. And so I have one person on my team that answers all of our phone lines for all four of our locations. And they also get text messages through Grasshopper to those lines. So I think we have 9 or 10 phone lines, something along those. We have a lot, but it's only $10 extra per line. So it's not a big deal to add more.
Okay, got it. Okay, thanks.
No problem.
Okay, so if you didn't catch that, Lisa, that's why I kind of skipped over. Jen's incredible husband, Brad, created their incredible software that we all have been itching to get a part of, but she's keeping it proprietary, and that is a smart business move, my friend. All right, so I'm going to ask 2 questions to close this out, unless other folks have questions to put in the chat. But Jen, if you could do it all over again, what would you do differently?
So a common answer when I get this question in anything in life is I wouldn't do anything differently, because you learn from your mistakes and you grow, but that's not the answer you guys want to hear. But that's how I feel. I wouldn't change. But if I had to answer that question, if you couldn't let me answer that way, I would say I probably would have started from the bat, keeping everything in house. I wouldn't do royalties and have someone have that separately. Not that anything went wrong. It just took a lot longer to gain traction in Denver. And now we're doing so well in Denver. And I feel like that could have happened a lot quicker if we kept it in-house and started that process. And then same thing, I feel like we started as a, baby in Dallas and tested that all out. I wish I could have just tested that all out in Denver and worked out the kinks then and kind of got rolling in that regard.
Love it. And then tell people really quickly a little bit more about your team, if you feel like there's more to kind of fill in the blanks. You employ some of them you have through Level, right?
Yeah, so we have 6 full-time US based staff. I always do full-time. I know it's hard to wrap your brain around when you're first starting to hire to want to do part-time versus full-time, but that's something I used to do, the independent contractor route, like do call references, do interviews whenever you could fit it in, and then you can technically classify them as an independent contractor. I found that just having an employee being able to really manage their time and have them be a part of a cohesive team has been more successful to me than any time I've tried to do the kind of part-time fill-in independent contractor type of work. And so everybody in my team's full-time. When I'm ready to hire, I make sure I can do a full-time person. And so we have 6 full-time US, and then I have 2 virtual assistants in the Philippines.
Amazing. And how many hours a week are you working now?
I say I'm up to about 30 right now, but that's because I was like 15 or 20 before, but I'm getting more, like enjoying working more, getting more back into it. And I feel like I've explored. When we moved to Hawaii, I was exploring a lot more now, and now I'm more of work mode. But I
Yeah.
don't have to. I'm taking off 2 weeks when my sister's here, and I can take off as much time as I want. I am at the point where my staff can run the company without me. I just genuinely enjoy what I do and like to be involved in it.
I understand. Jen, you're such an inspiration. Thank you so much for sharing with us, giving us these incredible tips. I have pages of notes I have taken. I'm honored to have you part of the community. I'm really excited to see you this summer at the retreat. And I can't wait to come see you in Hawaii. I got to make that happen. It'll be great. But thank you all for joining us. Feel free to follow Jen online. She is very active on social media and in our MMC group. I hope that you will join us for our next webinar, which is actually going to be Clint from Level.
Oh, yeah. That's how I hired my virtual assistants. I love him. He's really passionate about what he does. He's great. And also my virtual assistants love working for Level, by the way, because you can do it on your own. And I've tried to steal them away from Level, and they love their benefits, their healthcare. Like, they're like, no, we're good. We like working for the company. So that's good.
Yes, don't steal them, Jen. But thank you all so much for being here. I hope you have an amazing weekend, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Bye.